Football is a game that stirs every emotion imaginable. The joy of winning, the heartbreak of defeat, those are expected. But sometimes it's panic, sometimes it's excitement. And then there are the emotions that are hardest to control. The anger, the tension, the friction. And what's worse, it's not always with the opponents. Sometimes it's with the people on your own side. Today, we dive into the first chapter of the most explosive footballer-manager feuds in history. Stories of those who completely lost control, who plotted behind each other's backs, power struggles, broken trust, and decisions that changed everything. You're watching Balllogue, and if you're thinking about subscribing, well, this might just be the perfect time, because things are about to get heated. If you want to play for a Pep Guardiola team, there's one non-negotiable. Your ego stays at the door. From Aguero to Kevin De Bruyne, none managed to change that reality. In a Guardiola team, no one outshines the coach. At the end of the day, the finished product bears his signature, and he gets the lion's share of the credit. Cancelo learned that the hard way. Known for his attacking flair as a right-back at Valencia, Inter and Juventus, the Portuguese defender found a new chapter in his career at Manchester City, redefined by Guardiola's vision. As an inverted fullback, Cancelo became one of the best in the world at operating in a hybrid role. For years, he executed it flawlessly. Then, something changed. Cancelo believes it all started after the 2022 World Cup. Maybe Pep saw something during the tournament. Maybe he had one of those brilliant tactical epiphanies. Either way, City returned from Qatar playing in a system that barely needed fullbacks. Instead, it favoured hybrid defenders like Nathan Ake and Rico Lewis. Cancelo's minutes began to disappear. After being benched in a 1-0 FA Cup win over Arsenal, Pep publicly praised Ake, then added, "Everyone's happy. Well, maybe except one." He didn't name names, but everyone knew who he meant. Not long after Cancelo confronted him at training. Why wasn't he playing? Pep's reply, "Maybe you need to leave." And that was it. Cancelo was loaned out to Bayern Munich in the January window. Guardiola kept it brief. He wanted to play every game. Hopefully he can do that at Bayern. Cancelo, still under contract with City, stayed quiet for months. After half a season in Munich and another year on loan at Barcelona, the silence finally broke. "The things said about me were lies," he claimed. "I've never been a bad teammate. Ask Nathan or Rico. I never saw myself as above anyone. The club was ungrateful, even though I was one of the most important players during my time there. My loyalty never wavered. I remember getting robbed and attacked. Then, the very next day, leaving my wife and daughter at home to play against Arsenal. These are things you don't forget. Guardiola has more influence in the media, so people believe what he says, but I know I'm telling the truth." Guardiola, as usual, didn't respond. When asked about Cancelo returning for pre-season, he said, "He could stay. He could leave. We'll see." We saw. Cancelo was sold to Saudi champions Al Hilal, a player once considered among the best fullbacks in Europe, now struggling to hold a spot in the Portuguese national team. We begin with a clash that crossed the line. Literally, Yayich kicked off his Serie A career at Fiorentina after joining the club at just 19. In his second season, things weren't going well for the Viola, and manager Sinisa Mihajlovic was replaced by Deio Rossi. Under Rossi, Yayich began getting more minutes, but what happened in the penultimate game of the season would leave a stain on both of their careers. Fiorentina were hosting Novara in Florence. The visitors stunned the home crowd with 2 early goals, and relegation still loomed large for Fiorentina. In a move that shocked everyone, Rossi decided to sub off Yayich in the 31st minute. Now, getting benched at halftime is one thing, but getting yanked off half an hour into a game you started, that stings. Ironically, Rossi's decision worked. Fiorentina clawed back to a 2-2 draw, but as Yayich walked off the pitch, he mockingly applauded his manager and added a few choice words. Rossi snapped. He leapt toward Yayich in the dugout, unleashing punches in a shocking outburst of rage. The aftermath was swift. Club president Andrea Della Valle immediately sacked Deio Rossi. Yayich, on the other hand, was suspended for the final 2 matches of the season. Fiorentina survived relegation, and Yayich went on to impress the following year, helping the club and fans move on. But according to some reports, Rossi's fury wasn't just about football. The rumour, Yayich, in that moment of tension, said something unforgivable, targeting Rossi's son, who reportedly had Down syndrome. The insult? "You're more retarded than your own son," Rossi later addressed the media. "I won't repeat what he said, because that would be making excuses. What I did was shameful. It was a mistake, and I apologize to the team, the players, the club, and everyone. All I ever ask is for respect, for myself, for the badge I represent, and for my family." He arrived for €101 million, lit up 2 separate Champions League finals, scored over 100 goals in a Real Madrid jersey, and collected 16 trophies. And yet, when fans look back today, Gareth Bale's final years in Madrid are remembered with more frustration than fondness. Most associate the decline with his feud with Zidane, but according to Ancelotti, the cracks had already begun to show long before that, when Bale was still in top form. In his 2016 book, Quiet Leadership, Winning Hearts, Minds and Matches, Don Carlo revealed that Bale's demands were the beginning of the end of his own tenure at the club. "One morning in March I got a call from the general manager. The president wanted to speak with me," Ancelotti recalls. "Florentino Perez told me that Bale's agent had contacted him. Bale wanted to play a more central role, but he had never spoken to me. I was more qualified than both the agent and the president to make that decision." Later, after subbing Bale off during a match against Valencia, Ancelotti said his relationship with Perez began to sour. He believed Bale could be selfish at times, while the president perhaps still saw Gareth as a key pillar of Madrid's future and refused to back his coach. Time passed, Zidane returned, the trophies kept coming, but Bale's image began to crumble. He stopped celebrating goals, made gestures that hinted at a growing distance from the club. The crowd turned on him, but with his enormous contract, parting ways wasn't so simple. Eventually, Zidane made his move. Bale was cut from the squad. The official reason? He had reportedly refused to come off the bench on multiple occasions. Zidane insisted there was no personal issue, but it was clear Bale would not play for him again. Maybe it was Bale's passive-aggressive nature, or maybe he just didn't want to go head-to-head with a figure as commanding as Zizou. "We never had a heated argument," Bale later said. "I mean, he was one of the greatest players I've ever seen. The things he could do with the ball were unreal. There was no issue with how we treated each other. We just disagreed on a few things." During Zidane's final season, Bale spent a year on loan at Spurs. When Ancelotti returned, Bale remained on the bench, quietly finishing the final year of his contract, before walking away from Madrid for good. One of the most explosive episodes of the 2000s was the clash between Sir Alex Ferguson and David Beckham. Ferguson was, quite literally, immovable, a force of nature within Manchester United. His word wasn't just law, it was culture. At one point, even the club's largest shareholders, Morgan and McManus, were pushed aside after a falling out with him. If you want the full story, check out our piece, The Fall of Manchester United. But for now, here's what you need to understand. Inside the club, Ferguson was more powerful than anyone, even the owners. And Beckham? He was United royalty, a product of the academy, the golden boy with the movie star aura, captain of the England national team. In 2001, he'd curled in a last-second free kick against Greece to send his country to the World Cup, a goal that sealed his place as a national hero. The idea of these two giants colliding seemed unthinkable. But according to Ferguson, the tension had started long before the public ever saw it. He and his staff had already begun to feel that Beckham's time at United was nearing its end. His assistant, Carlo, believed Beckham had become too focused on commercial deals, and that he was bulking up for the cameras, not the pitch. Beckham later dismissed that claim in his 2023 documentary, calling it nonsense. He insisted he'd never allow anything to affect his performance. But whether it was the weight room or something else, Ferguson was convinced Becks had lost his edge. The breaking point came in an FA Cup match against Arsenal. United lost 2-0, and Ferguson blamed Beckham for the second goal scored by Wiltord. Furious, he ripped into him in the dressing room. Then, in a moment that would become infamous, Ferguson kicked a stray boot out of frustration, and it struck Beckham in the face, opening a cut above his eye. The next day, Beckham arrived with his hair pulled back and a visible bandage on his brow. Ferguson saw it as a challenge, a public message. "At that moment," said Sir Alex, "I told the board he had to go. The second a player thinks he's bigger than the manager, he has to leave, lose control of the dressing room, and you lose the club. You cannot let players run it." Would the same methods work today? Probably not. But back then, Ferguson got results, and in this battle of egos, he made sure there was no doubt about who was boss. The tension came to a head when United faced Real Madrid in the Champions League quarter-final. Ferguson benched Beckham for the second leg at Old Trafford. That night, Ronaldo Nazario scored a sensational hat-trick. Beckham came on in the final 30 minutes and scored twice, one of them a trademark free kick. It was his way of answering Ferguson on the pitch. That match would be one of Beckham's last in a United shirt. That summer, he was sold to Real Madrid, and Ferguson handed the legendary number 7 jersey to a new arrival, a quiet 18-year-old Portuguese kid. His name, Cristiano Ronaldo. One of the managers often said to have a tense relationship with his players is Thomas Tukul. Despite a highly successful spell at Paris Saint-Germain, his departure came as a surprise, and many believed he'd lost the dressing room. At Chelsea, one of the names Tuchel clearly clashed with was Romelu Lukaku. Fresh off a Champions League triumph, Tuchel wanted to push for Premier League glory as well. To do that, he requested a striker who had just dominated Serie A, Romelu Lukaku. Chelsea agreed, paying Inter a staggering €113 million to bring back their former player. At first, things looked promising. Lukaku didn't score as much as expected, but Tuchel praised him constantly, calling him a valuable asset. That harmony, however, would be short-lived. During an international break, Lukaku gave an interview to Sky Sports Italy that rocked the boat at Stamford Bridge. "I feel great physically," he said, "just like I did during my best time in Italy, but I'm not happy with the situation at Chelsea. The coach plays a system that doesn't suit me. I'll keep working professionally, but Inter is always in my heart. I know I'll return there one day, and I hope it's while I'm still in my prime, not at the end of my career." Some say the real damage had already been done. According to one rumour, while watching a Spurs match, Tuchel jokingly pointed at the screen and told Lukaku, "There's your daddy," referring to Antonio Conte. It may have been meant as a joke, but Lukaku, who always had a close bond with Conte, didn't take it lightly. Chelsea were already struggling in the league, and Lukaku's comments hit like an earthquake. Tuchel didn't hold back in his response. "I can say I didn't like it, because it doesn't help what we're trying to build. He never mentioned anything to me. If he was unhappy, we could have dealt with it privately." After that, Lukaku was benched for most of the season. His form dipped. His confidence faded. Antonio Conte, watching from afar, chimed in, "If you have a striker like that, you have to use him properly. I don't think Chelsea ever figured out how to do that." When the season ended, Lukaku never wore a Chelsea shirt again. But Tuchel didn't last much longer either. Later, in an interview, Tuchel admitted the whole saga had been a disappointment, and not just because of the player. "It was my job to get the best out of him, and clearly I didn't. I was ready to try again, but leaving was Romelu's decision." Maybe there was a bit of truth in Tuchel's joke after all, because Lukaku eventually ended up with Conte again, this time at Napoli, and for the first time in years, he's starting to look like the old Inter version of himself. From the very first day he arrived at Chelsea, Mourinho carried an air of arrogance that divided the football world. After all, he had the audacity to call himself the Special One in his first press conference.
"I'm European champion, so I'm not one of the bottle. I think I'm a special one."
Sharp, confident, and always ready with a punchy quote, Jose cultivated a public persona that often made him seem cold, combative, and difficult. But behind the bravado, Mourinho has always preferred open, direct communication with his players. In fact, the larger-than-life personality he presents to the media often serves one purpose: to take the heat off his team. He creates a protective shield, drawing criticism onto himself and allowing his players room to breathe. That said, even the best communicators have their breaking points. And for Mourinho, one of the most turbulent chapters came during his time at Manchester United, with Paul Pogba. Pogba arrived as the most expensive signing in the club's history. Arguably the most talented player on the roster, he was someone Mourinho couldn't afford to bench. But to the Portuguese coach, Pogba was also a child who refused to grow up. According to one claim, Mourinho asked Pogba to model his game after Frank Lampard. Pogba's response? "I won the World Cup. Lampard didn't." Supporters of Pogba argued that the issue was tactical. Didier Deschamps had unlocked Pogba's full potential in the French national team, while Mourinho failed to do so at United. That wasn't on Pogba, it was on the coach. Mourinho saw it differently. The World Cup is the perfect setup for a player like him. Why? Because for 1 month, he's locked in a camp. He thinks only about football. During a club season, it's a big game, then a smaller one, then one that barely matters. It's easy to lose focus. For Pogba, the turning point came in 2017, after an injury. During his rehab in Miami, paparazzi photos surfaced showing him partying during Fashion Week. Mourinho forwarded one of the images to Pogba's agent, Mino Raiola, with a message that read, "While we're working hard here, he's enjoying himself." Pogba said that moment broke his trust in Mourinho and led to a deep depression. Things got worse when Pogba publicly criticised the team's defensive tactics after a 1-1 draw against Wolves. Mourinho responded by stripping him of the vice-captaincy. Pogba claimed his words were taken out of context. Then came the infamous Derby County match. United lost on penalties in the League Cup. Pogba, not in the squad, posted a smiling video on social media while watching from the stands. Mourinho had had enough. The next morning, Pogba was sent to train with the reserves. His defence? "We were winning 1-0 when I posted it." Tension reached a boiling point. Roughly 3 months later, Mourinho was sacked. Within minutes, Pogba posted a smug photo to social media, smiling knowingly. He deleted it soon after, claiming it had nothing to do with Mourinho's dismissal, but few believed him. Over time, a pattern emerged. Pogba behaved like a talented but immature child who constantly avoided accountability. And Mourinho? After leaving United, he said, "Finishing second with this team might be one of the greatest achievements of my career." He believed time would prove him right. Looking back now, was he? Well, that's for you to decide. That's the end of part 1 in our series. If there's a player-manager feud you'd like to see featured in the next episode, drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you soon.